If the music doesn't reflect the unique rhythms of the game, it becomes background music which might as well be piped in from another room. This is a driving philosophy for composer Koji Kondo. Rhythm, balance, and interactivity are the three things that he contemplates most while composing, which has led Kondo's music to be as iconic as the games they come from. While the man himself isn't as well known as Nintendo superstars like Satoru Iwata, Masahiro Sakurai, or Shigeru Miyamoto, his work continues to immeasurably affect the gaming industry and everyone in it. From the dynamic energy of the Mario theme song to the epic scale of the Legend of Zelda's score, the impact of Kondo's music has influenced a generation of musicians and fundamentally changed how video game music is written. This is how a kid playing around on an electric organ became the author of the most recognizable music in gaming. This is Koji Kondo. Koji Kondo was born on August 13, 1961 in Nagoya, Japan. At the age of 5, he started studying the electric organ, specifically the Yamaha Electone. He would later take up the piano during his childhood as well. In middle school, Kondo became a fan of hard rock, particularly the band Deep Purple. In high school, he would often listen to jazz and fusion bands such as Cassiopeia, Sadao Watanabe, Chick Corea, and Herbie Hancock. While Koji Kondo was in some amateur bands during his schooling, he never dreamt of being a lead singer or a guitarist. Instead, he always imagined himself working behind the scenes, playing the keyboard, or working in studios. This desire to create music while avoiding the limelight forged the path he would walk on in his life. It's also worth noting that he first came into contact with video games during this period of his youth. He was mesmerized by the medium after being introduced to Pong. Kondo would later attend the Osaka University of Arts, majoring in art planning, where he studied alongside another future Nintendo employee, Takashi Tezuka. Kondo initially believed he would work as a director or a producer of various arts, furthering his dream of working behind the scenes. His interest in arcade games also grew during this period as the hardware was able to produce more sounds. He fondly remembered playing the games Space Invaders and Donkey Kong 3 at a local coffee shop while at university. Kondo never studied anything directly related to music production, but still used much of his free time to create music. He became interested in the creation process of music on computers, and used the programming language BASIC to make sounds on his personal computer. While Kondo was in university, developers at Nintendo realized how music and sound effects were becoming increasingly important to the design process. Before this, much of the audio and game development was created by programmers, usually as an afterthought. In Kondo's senior year, Nintendo placed an ad for a dedicated sound programmer on the university's job placement board. Kondo saw the ad and decided to apply, following his passion for both creating synthesizers and playing video games. In 1984, Kondo was hired to work in Nintendo's EAD division, becoming the third person Nintendo hired solely for sound and music after Hirokazu Hip Tanaka and Yukio Kanioka. Nintendo would be the only company Kondo ever interviewed for and the only place he has worked for during his entire life. Kondo described getting the job as a lucky break, as he didn't even submit any demo tapes for the position. Kanioka was a mentor for Kondo, giving the younger man advice from Kanioka's time composing on titles like Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Mario Bros. After joining Nintendo, Kondo started work right away. One of his first tasks was recreating the themes for Saze-san and Doraemon, and some Seiko Matsuda songs. This was done in Family Basic, a programming language used to create games for the Famicom. Kondo then worked on the Famicom Basic, writing instructions on how to translate popular music into sounds for the system. More importantly, during this period, he developed his philosophy for creating sounds for games. He later said, "All games contain unique rhythms in some form or another. These rhythms can be found in character movements and also in the timing in which the players press buttons. It's essential to grasp these rhythms and use the ones that represent the most satisfying playing experience and create music based on them." The first game he would ever work on was the arcade version of Punch-Out! This title featured a unique hardware setup with two separate monitors, which meant that there were two separate sound amps. One of the amps was used exclusively for speech, while the other was used for various sound effects such as crowd noises. The title was in production before Koji Kondo joined the company, and was made specifically to appeal to Western audiences. Kanioka gave Kondo the challenge to make music that resembled a sports TV theme using only the 3 sound channels that were available on the hardware. Kondo delivered, and Punch-Out! Would become a hit for the company, partially due to the game's music. Interestingly, the theme song for both the arcade and NES release is actually based on a song called Gillette Look Sharp March, which would air during boxing matches in the 1950s. Kondo's next project was Golf, the first of many Famicom and NES titles he would compose for, including soccer, kung fu, volleyball, and the mysterious Murasame Castle, to name a few. Around this time, Kondo collaborated with Shigeru Miyamoto on the title Devil World. While he is only credited for the title's bonus stage music, Miyamoto was nonetheless impressed with Kondo and his work. Kondo was brought over to R&D 4, a new division that was headed by Miyamoto. R&D 4 would later become Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, one of the company's most accomplished internal studios. Here, Kondo composed for a title that would define both his career and a generation: Super Mario Bros. When tasked for writing the music for this new game, Kondo went through a number of experiments to find the right tone. In an interview with Nintendo Minute, he reflected on this process, explaining, "The first thing I saw was the grass-covered plains, so I wrote this laid-back, relaxed music. However, it didn't really fit the game, so I thought I needed to create music that matched the speed of the game, the speed of Mario running, the liveliness of his jumps, and so I played the game over and over again, and created music that matched the rhythms of the game." The main Mario theme was something that Kondo worked on tirelessly, as he felt it needed to fit the game and enhance the gameplay, while also never becoming tedious. Super Mario Bros. Marked a departure from typical sound design in games, even for Kondo. The audio was developed simultaneously with the game instead of during the title's post-production phase. This led the music and gameplay impacting each other, and Kondo getting feedback from designers and programmers. This resulted in several revisions during development and an overall stronger score. The first piece Kondo finished on Super Mario Bros. Was the underwater theme, because he felt it was easy to imagine a tune for a water level. On the other hand, the underground theme would prove to be a challenge, and Kondo eventually decided to make the music a rhythmic and difficult account, so that players would feel uneasy. The overall development time for Super Mario Bros. Was short, reportedly less than 1 year, but Kondo worked on tuning his tracks to fit the game endlessly. His efforts paid off, as almost every single track from the Super Mario Bros. Score is beloved to this day. With Mario finished, Kondo moved on to another game that would spawn a highly influential series, The Legend of Zelda. With Mario, Kondo wanted the style to feel similar to popular music. However, when tasked to write the score for a fantasy setting, he felt it would be best to make the music have an otherworldly feel. Interestingly, Kondo originally intended to use the piece Bolero by composer Maurice Ravel as The Legend of Zelda's title theme, but late in development discovered that the song had not yet entered the public domain. This forced Kondo to create a new arrangement of the game's overworld theme in under a day, which has become an iconic part of the franchise. Andrew Schartman, author of Koji Kondo's Super Mario Bros. Soundtrack, explained, "Zelda music is epic. What makes it special, however, is how Kondo combines so many different genres into something entirely his own. Gregorian chant, Hollywood fantasy, rustic folk, 20th century classical, the overworld theme was inspired by Bolero, and medieval troubadour all melded into one. It was a new kind of music, really, something that had never been heard before, especially when dressed up in synthesized sounds." A third franchise that Kondo was integral in was the sci-fi space shooter series Star Fox. Though he did not compose the original score for Star Fox on the SNES, Kondo worked closely with the designers and programmers at Argonaut Software to create the game's iconic sound effects. These included the gibberish voices used for the characters' dialogue. Star Fox programmer Dylan Cuthbert told DidYouKnowGaming,
"Koji Kondo, he dragged me into the music room one day to record some of the voices that he used in during the game. And even now, I don't know which voices he used that were mine, because I think he actually combined them together and tried to make them sound like they were from an alien planet or something."
Cuthbert also noted that Kondo was always kind to the developers he worked with. Kondo even stopped during a demonstration of Wii Music at E3 when he noticed Cuthbert in the audience and wanted to talk to him. Many of the games that Kondo worked on would become successful enough to spawn long-lasting franchises. Though Kondo wasn't always the sole composer for these games, more often than not he contributed music or supervised the soundtracks to ensure they were up to his standards. He returned to the Star Fox franchise with Star Fox 64, this time co-writing its soundtrack with Hajime Wakai. Kondo composed the game's iconic main theme, the menu music, and the fanfares that played at the beginning and end of levels. His work on Star Fox 64 remains unique in his discography, taking a direction far more like Hollywood sci-fi blockbusters than any of his other soundtracks. Kondo's choices for Star Fox 64's score have become the definitive musical direction for the series, which still draws inspiration from Kondo's work for this title. One of the most recognizable titles Kondo composed for was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, a game that revolved heavily around the use of diegetic music for its gameplay. As IGN pointed out in their review, the buttons on the N64's controller used to play the ocarina in-game actually resembles the layout of a real ocarina. This only furthered Kondo's goal of creating truly interactive and immersive music. Though the core of what would become Zelda's musical themes were composed for A Link to the Past, many of the pieces that originated in Ocarina of Time have become particularly integral to the Zelda franchise. Kondo also created many variations of the music for this title, fearing that players would get bored hearing the same overworld music over and over. He opted to have 12 different phrases of music and have them play in a random order. These would mesh in a way that the player wouldn't overtly notice, but would always keep the music feeling fresh. In addition, this same strategy was used to dynamically change the music if the player entered or left a battle, or if they simply stood still. This sort of interactivity, even if it was not immediately noticeable, has always been a driving force in the way Kondo approached his music design. This often meant going against his own instincts, or against popular requests from fans in the media. An excellent example of this can be found in The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Though Kondo did not compose for this title, he was the sound supervisor for the project. After many requests from members of the media and following his own preference for live music, Kondo initially envisioned Twilight Princess's music being performed by a 50-piece orchestra. However, further into development, Kondo opted to use MIDI-based sequenced music instead, simply because it offered more control and interactivity for the player. For example, the dynamically changing music in the sequence where the player chases Skull Kid was created by integrating the sequenced music into the game's surround sound. This in turn allowed the player to spatially locate the Skull Kid. This same strategy was used in another game that Kondo co-composed, Super Mario Sunshine, when the player is chasing Shadow Mario. In 2007, Kondo gave a speech at the Game Developers Conference where he expanded on his thoughts about the interactivity of music in games. He noted that games, and specifically character movement, operates on an internal computer clock. He believes it's natural for music to follow these same parameters, so music can interact with character action and music. The new Super Mario Bros. Series is perhaps one of the most notable examples of this, as enemies react in tune with the music. In fact, the Mario franchise has been one of the standard bearers for Kondo's philosophy, and its impact on the series can be tracked all the way back to Super Mario Bros. In this game, when the player is almost out of time to complete a level, the music would speed up. In Super Mario World, drums were added to the music anytime Mario rode a Yoshi, in hopes of making the player feel more powerful without disrupting the music. This idea was pushed even farther with Super Mario 64's Jolly Roger Bay, which incorporates strings into the composition whenever Mario enters the water. Drums and bass are similarly added to highlight the sense of adventure as Mario enters the level's caverns and caves. As sound supervisor, Kondo wrote 4 tracks for 2007's Super Mario Galaxy, while Mahito Yokota took on the rest. Yokota was in charge of the musical direction during the title's development, and originally envisioned a Latin American-inspired score in a cute style that would appeal to children. When Yokota presented this to Kondo, it was rejected outright. Kondo told Yokota, "If somewhere in your mind you have an image that Mario is cute, please get rid of it." Kondo insisted that Mario's character was cool instead, and encouraged Yokota to try again. The pair worked together to brainstorm 3 music samples in 3 different genres, with Kondo writing one of them and Yokota writing the other 2. When Yokota presented the 3 pieces to Shigeru Miyamoto to decide the direction of the music, Miyamoto chose an orchestral piece because it sounded the most space-like. This was the one that Kondo wrote, which Miyamoto was unaware of while making his decision. Super Mario Galaxy's score features 28 tracks performed by a 50-piece live orchestra, similar to the setup that Kondo originally envisioned for Twilight Princess. Early on, this concerned Kondo, fearing it would somehow take away from the freedom of the player, who might feel obligated to play in time with the music. To solve this issue, the orchestra played all of the tracks to multiple different tempos, allowing for dynamic shifts in the music during gameplay and for sound effects to be more easily synced with the pieces. When describing his writing process, Kondo said that inspiration usually strikes him in unexpected places. He told Polygon that he has rarely been able to come up with the melodies for the main theme in any game he's worked on while at his office. Kondo said, "Usually I'll be in the bathtub. It's like, oh, there it is. Or I'll be sleeping and the melody is in my head. Or even, I'll be walking down the hallway in my house. Suddenly the music pops into my head." Regardless, Kondo considers the process of composition for a game to be collaborative, and he doesn't even begin to work until he has an opportunity to meet with a project's director and designers. He then begins brainstorming ideas, talking to the developers to get a sense of what kind of music would fit with the tone and setting of the game. He only begins composing after he's had an opportunity to play a prototype of a game, tinkering with it until he feels like he understands how it works. Koji Kondo and his influence on the industry has been immeasurable. His work on Mario and Zelda alone makes him one of the most impactful composers in all of gaming, and his music has transcended the medium into the general consciousness of pop culture. The Mario theme song is such a staple that in 2006 it ranked on Billboard's Hot Ringtones chart for 112 weeks straight. Kondo even had the honor of meeting Sir Paul McCartney when the singer came to Japan. Kondo said, "I went backstage with Miyamoto and a few others, and when Miyamoto was kind enough to introduce me as the composer of Mario, Paul McCartney started singing the overworld background music from the original game. It had been many years since its debut, so I was surprised he knew it, and I was really happy." In 2008, Kondo was honored at the Computer Entertainment Developers Conference's first award show, accepting an award on behalf of Nintendo's sound team for their work on the Legend of Zelda franchise. Additionally, his work on both Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Super Mario 3D World were nominated for Best Original Music at the BAFTA Game Awards. Kondo's music has frequently been performed by various symphonies from around the world, with Kondo himself occasionally conducting them. At the 2014 Game Awards, he even performed alongside American rock band Imagine Dragons. In the early 1990s, Kondo explained that as the hardware progresses, the quality of music improves, and soon game music will have to compete on the same level as general music. I want to take on those new challenges. This forward-thinking ideology, along with his drive to make his music as interactive as the games they were written for, has solidified Kondo as not only one of the greatest musicians in the gaming industry, but as one of the most beloved composers of the modern era. His career has been long and storied, and with Kondo returning to the composer's podium for Super Mario Maker 2, it's far from over. Be sure to check out our other videos on Nintendo's Reggie Fils-Aimé and Masahiro Sakurai. Also, if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future. Also, we'd like to give a special thanks to SourceGaming for help researching and writing this video.